One of the more important criteria for the film review is your ability to have a clear position about Night of the Living Dead and to support that position with strong detail from the film. Now, when I say have a clear position about the film, that doesn't mean that you have to completely like it or completely hate it, but the review is centered on your thoughts on the film, not a summary of the film. The ability to use detail in your writing is one of the more important skills that you can learn. Using strong sensory details can make your writing much more vivid. Using those kinds of details and being able to use some film terminology are important skills that you'll need in order to do well on this upcoming assignment. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to use those details, how to integrate those details into your writing, and I'll also say a little bit about film terminology. So let's go ahead and get started. So sensory details are things like sight, sound, smells, touch, taste. Using those kinds of details in your writing can make a very real difference to your readers. It places them more into what they're reading. Let me give you an example. Let's say that I wanted to write a sentence where I'm describing my grandfather. And my grandfather was tough and worked hard. Yeah. So a grammatically correct sentence, there's nothing in here, there's no squiggly lines, word isn't telling me that anything's off. But it's not saying much about the subject. Like, it's not really saying all that. Like, I'm not going to remember that sentence. But if I add some sensory details, and include sensory details or describe him using sensory details, there's a chance that you're going to remember, or I'm going to remember a little bit more what that sentence says. Let me pause the screen and I'll give you an example of a sentence that has those kind of sensory details. So those are details that you can see down here in the second sentence. While he was in his early 80s, my grandfather once picked up 2 bags of concrete from the tailgate of his truck. His shoulders shrugged slightly, and his rough, worn hands barely moved as he carried the bags quietly across the yard. There's a lot going on in there. It's obviously quite a bit more text than the first sentence, but there's a lot more detail in there. 2 bags of concrete, that's something that we can see. Shoulders shrugged slightly, if you're fans of alliteration. So that means he didn't have to put much effort into it in moving these really heavy bags of concrete. This detail says, it shows you, it doesn't tell you that he was tough and he worked hard or that he was strong. It shows you it using the details. When it matters, when you're trying to convey something that's important, being able to use these kinds of details is absolutely essential in order for this to be believed by your reader. Let's use another example. So here's another sentence that doesn't really say all that much. I drove my old car through town. Again, grammatically correct. If we're just looking at it from a grammatical perspective, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that sentence. But it's a pretty boring sentence, and it's not going to tell us much. So what about a sentence that maybe tells us a little bit more? What about this? My rust and white-colored 1993 Geo Metro heaved and farted as it rattled through town. And I actually owned a 1993 Geo Metro. That car was so messed up that the hood of it flew off. I was driving from San Francisco to Sacramento once, and I had to buy another hood and chain it down and put a padlock on it. College years were tough for me. So with that second sentence, you see a lot more detail in that. You know that car. You've probably seen that car. You may even own that car. It's going to strike a bit more of an impression upon a reader. We've also got more active verbs here. Heaved, farted, rattled. Those are words that, we know, we see those verbs happening, or we hear those verbs happening. It makes more of an impression than this first sentence, which is kind of boring. Now, I want to be clear, not every sentence that you write needs to have that level of detail. But when you're trying to communicate something that's important, and you are trying to support a point that you have, using strong, concrete details can really help. In your film review, I'm not looking for every sentence to contain that level of detail. But if you tell me that you really liked or hated the film because of how suspenseful or scary it was or was not, whatever your opinion is on that criteria, you need to include some detail that supports that, whether you thought it was scary or not. Those of you out there saying something like, but bruh, I can never meet the word requirement for an essay. This is your anecdote to that. Having a clear opinion, thinking through that opinion, and supporting it with strong details, that's how you can do it. That's how you meet the word requirement. And it's not bullshit when you do it. It's good writing. So let's talk film terminology for a minute. Writing with strong details about the film means that you're able to identify sound and visual details. But it also means that you're able to use the language of film to describe what you're seeing and what you're hearing. Anytime you're entering a new conversation, a new discipline, a new major, a new organization, when you try to learn how to play a new game, there's an entire language that's around that new thing. SSU, for example. Before I came here, I had no idea what the hell a bursar was. What is a bursar? What do they burst? I have no idea. It's just the language that they use here at SSU and at other institutions to describe somebody that is kind of like the cashier for the institution. They take the money. That's language that's specific to SSU. In films, there's two categories of film terms, and I'll kind of keep it easy. There's other things we could complicate it, but just to kind of keep it easy for you. Cinematography, mise en scène. Cinematography relates to everything that is behind the camera. This includes film editing, camera positioning, film speed, special effects, other technical aspects of filmmaking. Mise en scène, however, it's a French term. It kind of means like in the scene, things in the scene. Addresses everything that's in front of the camera. So it's the actors, the wardrobe, the set design, diegetic sound. That's sound that you can see its source in a film. For today's activity, I'm going to ask you to watch a clip from a film classic, an absolutely wonderful film. If you haven't seen it, you really do need to see it. Alfred Hitchcock's 1960 Psycho. The film does depict a violent act, and if you'd rather not watch that, I'll give you some options in the discussion board prompt. To prepare for this activity, though, today, I want you to read the Purdue OWL page on film terminology, and I'll link to that in the discussion board prompt. The article doesn't mention mise en scène, so you might want to make note of that term somewhere, maybe in your notes that you're taking for the class. In today's post, I need to see you trying to use film terminology. You don't need to get it absolutely right. You don't need to write about every single term that you're going to come across, but I need to see you try. I really need to see that you're using details to support your thoughts, though, about the clip. That is a must. That's one of the essential criteria for the film review, and it's also one of the more important skills that's going to really improve your writing. So check out the discussion board prompt for more details, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you all think of this clip from Psycho. All right, bye for now.